The voice of sharing, durian ASEAN.
Welcome back again to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. Today in our ASEAN Breakfast Call, our second segment, which is the Blast from the Grassroots, we have two representatives from MyConsti. Two of them are lawyers, Nimalan Devaraja, am I correct?
Yes, you are.
And also Joanne Leong.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and you guys are going to share your views about the judiciary system in this country. So, I guess first of all, based on the Rakyat Guides that I have it here, is what is the judiciary? I mean, in Malaysia, what is the judiciary system in Malaysia? Can you describe it more?
Well, how the judiciary system in Malaysia works is basically the constitution has set up three courts: the Federal Court, the Court of Appeal, and the High Courts. With the High Courts, we have two High Courts. The High Court of Malaya, which deals with the Peninsular Malaysia, and the High Court of Sabah and Sarawak, which deals with cases coming out of East Malaysia. These courts are referred to as the Supreme Courts. We also have another court set up under the Constitution, known as the Special Court, which deals with the Yang di-Pertuan Agong and the other rulers. Below the High Court, we also have the Sessions Court and the Magistrates Court. The Magistrate Court deals with claims up to, I believe, 20,000 ringgit, and the Session Court deals with claims up to 1 million ringgit. This only came into force last year, and because of this increase in the jurisdiction, you're seeing a lot more claims being filed in these lower courts. We also have the Sharia Courts in Malaysia, which Joanne will explain a bit more about.
The Sharia Courts in Malaysia, they are constituted under the state enactments. So each particular state have their own enactment to establish Sharia Courts, whether it's the High Court of Sharia in that particular state or the lower courts, of the lower Sharia courts of that particular state.
So I guess what you meant is the Sharia courts of each state is under the state's jurisdiction, or is it under the federal?
Because for religion, I believe that they are under the state list in the constitution. So the states are the ones that deals and decides on the law for religion. And Sharia courts being the courts for Islam, and so it's under the state list.
I mean, for example, if a woman, this is one of the case happened a few years ago, a woman being found drinking, a Muslim woman being found drinking in a particular state, in Pahang.
Yes.
Would it be under the federal purview or would it be under the state's purview?
If the person is being charged under the religious act, which is under the Muslim law, then she's being tried under the Sharia courts. And if she's tried in the Sharia courts, then it's under the state's purview. Yes.
Okay, so there's many courts that you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
But I think my biggest just curiosity is, what is the superior courts?
The superior courts are basically made out of the High Courts of Malaysia. I mentioned earlier that there were two, the High Court in Peninsula and High Court in Sabah and Sarawak. Then you have the Court of Appeal, and lastly the Federal Court, which is the apex court of our land.
So what are the limits of judicial power?
Basically, each courts have different things that they can deal with. The High Court, for example, powers include ordering a power of or an authority to do something or not to do something, declare that the action of a person is invalid. They also deal with a lot of commercial claims that are filed in the courts today. For example, breaches of contracts, shareholder disputes. The Court of Appeal deals with any matters being appealed against from the High Court. So, for example, if a litigant is dissatisfied with the decision of the High Court, he has direct right of appeal to the Court of Appeal. The Federal Court, on the other hand, being our apex court, has the most stringent role. firstly, you can appeal decisions of the Court of Appeal to the Federal Court. However, you first need leave of the Federal Court. What this means is you have to show that it's a question of law which has not been dealt with before by the Federal Court, or is of a public importance. So the Federal Court in this instance won't look into the facts of the case and only wants to decide on questions of law. What the Federal Court also can do, which the Court of Appeal and the High Courts cannot do, is to declare that the legislation of Parliament or the State Assembly is invalid because they do not have the power to make such legislation under the Constitution. The Federal Court also gets to determine any disputes between the states or between the federal government and the states.
So, what are other courts that you might want to elaborate more that is important in the judicial system?
I think what we want to highlight is probably how the judges they are being appointed. Now, for the lower courts, for example, the magistrates and the session court judges, they are appointed through the judicial legal services, whereas judges from the High Court and above, they are appointed either through, I believe, they are recommended by the Prime Minister to the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. And through that advice, these judges are then appointed. And then after and they must be of a number of years in either in service or in legal practice. And of course, subsequent elevation, we call it elevation. So it's from High Court, then after that to Court of Appeal, and then to the Federal Court. Of course, there are certain circumstances where they are directly elevated to the Court of Appeal or the Federal Court.
So, what's the difference between High Court and Court of Appeal?
Okay. Let's say, for example, your case is being filed in the High Court. If you lose your case, you have an automatic right to appeal directly to the Court of Appeal. So let's say your case begins in the High Court, and then you lose, you can after have a right to appeal to the Court of Appeal. Now, when you want to go a step further to the Federal Court, there's a requirement of what we call leave, means, for example, a permission to even let your case heard in the Federal Court. So without that permission, you can't go any further. And there are certain number of things that you must satisfy in order to get that permission.
I see. Is there any particular criteria that you can mention?
Yes, one of it is probably that the matter is a novel point of law, meaning that issue has never been brought up before in the courts. So this is the first time that it's being brought up to the Federal Court, and they requires the Federal Court's decision on it. Yeah.
And they also have, in our judiciary system, we also have this thing called special court. So what is a special court? Why is it so special?
The special courts only deal with matters rising from the Yang di-Pertuan Agong and the Council of Rulers. So it's just, it's not for the
laymen like us.
Yes.
It's for the kings
and the sultans.
The sultans.
Yeah.
I see. So, I'm just curious. I don't know. What are the interesting or recent issues that has been raised in the special courts, if there's any?
Because I think what happened in the special courts, it's not publicized.
I see.
Yeah. So I think they are done in a more different setting than how the normal cases are done in the High Courts and also in all the other courts in Malaysia.
So the way it is being conducted is totally different from the normal court that usually we would understand it.
Yes, I believe the procedure in those courts are a little bit different as well.
There's another court system that I'm also quite curious, which is special courts. I don't know whether it's called special court or not, but it's in Sabah and Sarawak, is where the natives, actually sort of being the one judging whether this person has made has conducted any wrongdoings, in the village or whatever.
I think what you are suggesting is probably those penghulu courts. We call it the courts within the village. Those courts are set up by the Acts of Parliament. I'm not very 100% sure, but I think penghulu courts have been abolished, I think, but not in Sabah Sarawak. But in terms of if you're talking about the hierarchy and the power, of course, the High Court of Sabah and Sarawak will be the...
This would probably just be like minor offences.
Correct. Yeah, something that happens within the village, yes.
So, another thing that I'm also wanting to know is about the judges. So, who can be a judge?
So, to be a judge, firstly, to be a Sessions Court and a Magistrate Court judge, which is our lower courts, you have to be in the Judicial Legal Service. So, qualified people with a law degree who come out, they join the Judicial Legal Service and they can join the prosecution, which be the Attorney General Chambers. They become registrars in the courts. Some become judges in the Magistrates Courts. And after a certain amount of years, they do have the opportunity to become Sessions Court judges. The judges of superior courts, on the other hand, are only those who have either practiced as lawyers, been a member of the bar for 10 years or more, or has been a member of this judicial and legal service for at least 10 years. So you do get to see a lot of Sessions Court judges getting elevated, but more recently you're starting to see a lot of senior members of the bar be given the opportunity to go into the judiciary.
Just in principle, when you want to be a judge, do you need to exert certain moral authority, as in like you have to have a certain character that they are looking for? I'm just curious because there's this saying that I don't know whether it's true or not, that you cannot like express like extreme emotion if you want to be appointed by a judge, just to show that you are this, like wise, calm Zen,
I don't think there's this particular set of rules. But if you want to be a judge, I think you must be an experienced member of the bar, at least 10 years and above. And also, I think you will need to seek approval as well, because you are moving on from, we call it the bench, because we are the one that's always sitting at the bench, lawyers, and then you're moving from the bench to the bar. So these are people, judges that's moving up from the legal practice.
I see. So can a judge be removed from his position?
Yes, a judge of the superior courts can be removed if he does not follow the judge's code of ethics, or if they find that he's physically or mentally unable to carry out his duties. If you want to remove the judge, either the Prime Minister or our Chief Justice, after consulting the Prime Minister, must speak to the Yang Di-Pertuan Agong on the reasons of why he feels the judge should be removed. What the Yang Di-Pertuan Agong will then do is to set up a tribunal consisting of at least 5 judges or former judges of the Supreme Court to decide whether the judge should be removed or not. You should, to be fair, the tribunal should consist of at least judges of the same standing or of superior standing. So, for example, if the judge in question was a Court of Appeal judge, the tribunal should be made up of either judges from the Court of Appeal or of the Federal Court.
And there's this thing called Code of Ethics for Judges. What is that?
Oh, the Code of Ethics from the judges. I think the most important thing about judges is that to uphold justice. So in order for them to uphold justice, they are not to be partial. They must be unbiased, and they must do everything fair and equal. Yes.
So they cannot be a member of any political party and participate in any political activity for a judge?
Yes, no, they can't be, because if you are a member of a particular political party, they might be perceived to be biased towards that because they are the member of that particular political party.
So yeah, and another question is I don't. It's a question that is, I would say, I don't know whether it's important or not. But I'm just wondering, are judges paid?
Yes, they need to survive too. Yes, they are. They are being paid. Yes.
Yeah. So when you talk about the judges, right? I think the most famous case when the judges was being removed from his duty is during the 1980s, the Mahathir's era. So what actually happened during at that time, and do the executive have the power to do that?
Okay. It all stemmed out from probably the changes in the constitution. There were certain amendments that was being made, and some of the judges were unhappy of that changes because it concerns their powers. So the Lord President at that time, Tun Saleh Abbas, wrote a letter to the Yang di-Pertuan Agong of that time, voicing out his concerns. I mean, he got the approval of the other judges, and then they wrote a letter together to the then Yang di-Pertuan Agong. This particular act that he did was in question, and therefore a tribunal was set up, and the Tun Saleh Abbas, together with some of the other judges, at the time we called it the Federal Court judges, Supreme Court judges. They were tried in that tribunal and was found guilty of misconduct, and therefore they were removed from the office.
They or him alone?
Him together with I believe 5 other Supreme judges.
I see. So what happened next when he and his team of people being removed?
So the time Tun Saleh Abbas was the Lord President. So because he was removed from the office, another Lord President was then appointed to take over that position.
But what happened? How has this incident or this event actually affect the judiciary system in this country?
I think the biggest concern would be the powers of the judiciary since then, because amendments were being made, and the judicial powers now comes from Parliament instead of the Constitution. Subsequently, I believe also that the tribunal that tried Tun Saleh Abbas and the other Supreme Court judges was later, I won't say found to be wrong, but the government later on did actually acknowledge that there was a mistake, and ex gratia payments was made to them.
Ex gratia payment.
Yes.
But eventually, I mean, the executive has the power to appoint a judge, right, or judges.
Yes. With what happened was back in 2009, the government set up what is known as the Judicial Appointments Commission. What the Judicial Appointments Commission is meant to do is it is meant to assist the Prime Minister in advising the Agong on the appointment of judges. So who sits on this commission it's the Chief Justice of Malaysia heads it, and the President of the Court of Appeal, Chief Justice of the High Court of Malaya, the Chief Justice of the High Court of Sabah and Sarawak, one sitting Federal Court judge, and there's also 4 other retired Superior Court judges. So this commission will then come up with a list of names which will recommend to the Prime Minister, who will then, the Prime Minister doesn't have an obligation on it to accept these names, but it must consider the names, and where the Prime Minister feels fit, he should advise the Yang di-Pertuan Agong on the appointment of these particular people to be judges.
I'm just curious, would a similar system be the same in other countries, let's say Singapore, or other democratic countries, if you know any?
I can't think of any, but this judicial commission is not something new. There are other countries who use this particular commission for the appointment of judges. Yes.
So this is my final question. So can our judiciary act as an effective check to prevent all abuse of power by parliament or by the executive? Especially, if you compare it from previous times to now, have it been effective?
Well, there is a difference from the previous times to now, mainly because of the amendment to Article 121. The Federal Court has recently accepted that under the Constitution, it only has the legal jurisdiction given to it by Parliament. What this means is that the courts will not question whether the laws made by Parliament are fair or just, but it only will determine whether Parliament has in fact made these laws under the Constitution. So, for example, we have seen courts holding that laws which limit the right of equality before the law or an arrested person's right to consult a lawyer is in fact valid. What this also means is that Parliament can make laws that prevent the courts from examining something that the executive has done. So you do see a lot of contentious Parliament acts containing ouster clauses, which basically say that there is no right for a party to appeal to the courts against a decision made, for example, by a minister or a police.
Anything to add on?
I would say that the courts now recently they have been looking into the acts of Parliament. They have been deciding whether those acts of Parliament is constitutional or unconstitutional. So I think there is a certain progression with our courts in Malaysia, which is something that is positive.
Positive,
Yes.
Especially ever since Mahathir's era, I guess.
there have been positive progression, I believe. Yes.
Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you for speaking with us and sharing such interesting view on the judiciary system in this country.
Thank you very much, Arlene.
much.